I never thought I'd be the kind of person to plot revenge. I always considered myself forgiving, maybe even too forgiving for my own good. But when your best friend betrays you in the worst way imaginable, and then has the audacity to invite you into their fairy tale ending, well, forgiveness isn't on the table anymore. This story starts almost 6 years ago. I was 24, deeply in love with a guy named Alex. We'd been together for nearly 3 years, and though we weren't perfect, we were stable. We talked about marriage. We were looking at apartments. He knew how I liked my coffee, and the way I hated sleeping with socks on. It was one of those comfortable, grown-up relationships that I thought would last forever. Enter Mia, my best friend since college. Mia and I were inseparable, the kind of friends who finished each other's sentences and knew each other's secrets. She'd been there through my worst breakups, my biggest life moments, and everything in between. She was family to me. I even joked that when I got married, she'd probably stand beside me as my maid of honor. But apparently, Mia took that as an invitation to audition for a different role in my life, the one of homewrecker. It started subtly. She and Alex got along, which I thought was great. I wanted my partner and best friend to like each other. They'd laugh at inside jokes, send each other memes, and sometimes hang out when I was busy. It didn't bother me at first. If anything, I felt lucky. But then, little things started to change. Alex grew distant. He stopped calling me his girl. He became cagey with his phone. Mia, meanwhile, grew strangely evasive about her dating life, which was weird, considering she used to give me every juicy detail. My gut told me something was off, but I brushed it aside. I didn't want to be the jealous, paranoid girlfriend. Then one rainy Thursday night, my world shattered. I came home early from work, a surprise dinner in hand, only to find Alex and Mia on my couch, wrapped around each other like a bad cliché. I remember the way my heart stopped, how the blood roared in my ears. They jumped apart, stammering excuses, but I didn't hear them. I just stood there, shaking, clutching the bag of takeout like it was an anchor in a storm. I kicked Alex out. Mia tried to call me dozens of times, but I blocked her number. For weeks, I stayed in bed, numb. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt. My boyfriend and my best friend, gone in a single blow. And not just gone, but together. I expected them to burn out quickly. Maybe it was just lust, I told myself. Maybe they'd realize how wrong it was. But no. They stayed together. They posted pictures. They went on vacations. They acted like they hadn't destroyed my life. For years, I avoided them. I built my life back up piece by piece. I got a new job, a new apartment, even started dating again. I wasn't happy exactly, but I was functional. And then, just when I thought I'd finally put them behind me, a message from Mia landed in my inbox. Hey, I know this might be a lot to ask, but I'd really love for you to be my maid of honor. I almost laughed out loud. She was marrying Alex, and she wanted me to stand beside her? The sheer audacity was breathtaking, but as my initial shock faded, something darker settled in its place. A slow, creeping thought. What if I said yes? The idea was intoxicating. They both clearly thought they'd won, that they'd stolen my life and gotten away with it. But what if I let them believe that? What if I stepped into their little fairy tale, not as the broken ex they remembered, but as something else entirely? I agreed. Mia squealed when I said yes, like we were still best friends. It means so much to me, she said. We've been through so much together. Oh, we had. More than she knew. Over the next few months, I threw myself into the role. I helped plan the bachelorette party. I picked out dresses. I even smiled for engagement photos. Mia seemed relieved, like this was proof that I'd finally forgiven her. But forgiveness was never part of the plan. Revenge, however, was. The first step was subtle. I reconnected with Alex. I didn't flirt, not obviously, but I reminded him of the bond we once had. A touch on the arm here, a shared memory there. I could see the cracks forming almost immediately. He was more hesitant around Mia. He lingered when we spoke. He started texting me. Innocent at first, but growing more personal. Meanwhile, I was quietly gathering information. Mia had always been a little reckless with her secrets, and she still trusted me enough to overshare. I learned about Alex's mounting debt, their fights about money, and Mia's lingering insecurity that he might cheat. Oh, the irony. Then, 2 months before the wedding, Alex invited me for a drink, just to catch up. It ended with him kissing me in the parking lot. I pulled away, feigning shock and anger, but inside I was grinning. He had no idea he'd just handed me the perfect weapon. I waited a week, then told Mia. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. I said Alex had made a move and that I'd shut it down immediately. Her reaction was exactly what I hoped for. Tears, accusations, panic. Their picture-perfect engagement started to crumble. But I wasn't done yet. At the bachelorette party, I made sure to invite a few people Mia would rather forget, like the ex she cheated on in college, and a girl she once bullied. I played dumb, pretending it was an oversight. But the drama that followed was delicious. By the time the wedding week arrived, their relationship was barely hanging on. They were fighting constantly. Alex had moved into the guest room. Mia looked like she hadn't slept in days. And then, the final blow. The night before the wedding, I sent Mia a message. It contained screenshots, messages Alex had sent me over the past month, dripping with regret and longing. He'd written about how he missed me, how he wasn't sure marrying her was the right choice, how he sometimes wondered if he'd made a huge mistake. I didn't add any commentary. I just sent them. The wedding never happened. Mia called it off that very night. Alex tried to contact me afterward, but I ignored him. As for Mia, the last thing she ever said to me was a single bitter line. "You ruined my life." I didn't reply, but if I had, I might have said, "No, Mia, you ruined mine." I just returned the favor. And the best part? She asked me to be a part of her happy ending. I simply accepted the invitation. You might think the story ends there, that my revenge was complete the moment she called off the wedding. But the truth is, that was only the beginning. Because while the engagement imploded spectacularly, the aftermath was even sweeter than I had ever imagined. The fallout started the very next morning. Mia's parents, who had already spent a small fortune on the venue, flowers, and catering, were furious. Her father called me personally, demanding to know what happened. I told him, calmly and without embellishment, that Alex had been unfaithful, that I had simply told Mia the truth. I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Mia's family had adored Alex. They thought she was finally settling down. Now they were left to pick up the pieces of her self-inflicted disaster. Alex tried harder to reach me after that. He sent emails, left voicemails, even showed up outside my apartment one night, begging for a chance to explain. He said he was confused, that he didn't know what he wanted anymore, that maybe we were meant to be after all. I listened to every word, let him pour his heart out, and then I said the one thing that would cut deepest. I don't want you. I never did. You were just part of the plan. The look on his face was priceless, a mix of shock, shame, and dawning realization. He wasn't the one in control anymore. I was. And I walked away without another word. Mia, meanwhile, was unraveling. She tried to turn people against me, telling anyone who would listen that I'd manipulated the situation, that I was some kind of vindictive psycho. But the problem with betrayal is that once people know what you're capable of, they stop giving you the benefit of the doubt. Everyone knew what she'd done to me. And now, with the wedding drama, They started to see her for what she really was. She lost friends. People distanced themselves. The sympathy she expected never came. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Alex had moved out completely. They'd tried to salvage the relationship, but the trust was gone. Every argument circled back to me, to what he'd said, to the messages, to the kiss he'd initiated. It ate them alive from the inside. And then, something unexpected happened. Maya showed up at my door. It was late, almost midnight, and she looked like a ghost of the girl I once knew. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup smudged, and there was a hollow desperation in her eyes. She asked if we could talk. I almost slammed the door in her face. But then I realized this was another opportunity, not for cruelty, but for closure. So I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table, and she started to cry. Real, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. She told me she'd made a mistake, that she didn't know why she'd done what she did, that she'd lost everything, her fiancé, her reputation, her friends, and now she just wanted forgiveness. It was almost pathetic. And for a moment, a small part of me, the part that had once loved her like a sister, felt sorry for her. But then I remembered standing in that doorway years ago, holding a bag of takeout, watching the two people I trusted most destroy me. I remembered every sleepless night, every tear, every moment I felt worthless. So I told her the truth. No, Mia, I don't forgive you. And I don't hate you either. I just don't care anymore. You made your choices, and now you're living with them. It's not my problem. She left without another word. That was the last time we ever spoke. I wish I could say I moved on instantly after that. But healing doesn't work that way. For a long time, I struggled with guilt, not because of what I did, but because I enjoyed it. Because watching them crumble felt so damn good. And then I realized something important. I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had reclaimed my power. They had taken so much from me. My trust, my happiness, my sense of self-worth. And I had taken it all back, piece by piece. But here's the part no one tells you about revenge. It doesn't erase the past, doesn't make the betrayal disappear. It just evens the scales. And once the scales were balanced, I finally had space in my heart for something else. Peace. I focused on myself after that. I traveled. I built a career I loved. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since before Alex. I even met someone new, someone who treated me with a kind of respect and kindness I didn't think existed anymore. And here's the delicious irony. Mia knows. She still follows me on social media, though she doesn't post much herself. Every time I share a photo, a vacation, a promotion, a date night, she sees it. And I know she remembers that this is the life she tried to steal from me. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret what I did. They say revenge is petty, that it's better to forgive and move on. Maybe they're right. Maybe in a perfect world, I would have taken the high road. But in this world, the real, messy, unfair one, sometimes justice isn't handed to you. Sometimes you have to build it with your own two hands. And that's what I did. I didn't break any laws. I didn't hurt anyone physically. I just exposed the truth, turned their own actions back on them, and watched them unravel under the weight of their choices. Some might call it cruel. I call it fair. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It's not just about losing someone. It's about losing the version of yourself that believed in them. And when that happens, you have two choices. You can stay broken, or you can rebuild. I chose to rebuild. And I made damn sure that the people who broke me knew I was stronger than they ever imagined. But if I'm being completely honest, there was one more layer to my plan. One final twist of the knife. About a year after their breakup, Alex reached out to me again, this time with a very different tone. He told me he was miserable, that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, that he wished he could go back and choose me. He even hinted at the idea of getting back together. I agreed to meet him for coffee, and for 2 hours, I let him believe there was a chance. I laughed at his jokes, reminisced about old memories, even brushed his hand once across the table. And just as he started to lean in, just as he was certain that I was about to forgive him, I dropped the final blow. I'd rather die alone than ever date you again. And then I walked out, just like he had once walked out on me. The look on his face followed me all the way home, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the girl who'd been betrayed. I felt like the woman who'd written the ending to her own story. It's been 3 years now. Mia moved to another city, I think. Alex is still single, according to a mutual friend. And me? I'm happy. Truly, deeply happy. I built a life that doesn't include either of them, and it's better than anything I could have imagined when I was that broken, heartbroken 24-year-old. So if you're listening to this, and you've been betrayed, if someone has stolen your trust, your love, or your future, let this be a reminder. You are not powerless. You don't have to forgive. You don't have to forget. You can choose justice. You can choose yourself. And if you're really lucky, you can make sure that the people who tried to destroy you never forget that you survived and thrived without them. There's something strange that happens after a revenge like mine. At first you think it's about them, the people who wronged you, the ones who deserve every ounce of pain you can deliver. But over time, you realize it's not really about them at all. It's about you, about reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to take, about proving, if only to yourself, that you were never the problem. For a while, I thought I could put everything behind me. I had closure. I had peace. But the universe, in its twisted sense of humor, wasn't done with me yet. About 18 months after the wedding that wasn't, I received an invitation in the mail. At first, I assumed it was junk, some random event or distant cousin's party. But when I opened it, my jaw literally dropped. It was a wedding invitation. Mia's wedding invitation. And guess who the groom was? Not Alex. Someone else. Apparently, she had met a man named Daniel, some corporate lawyer from Chicago, about 6 months after everything fell apart. They'd been dating long distance, and now were planning a quick engagement. And, to my utter disbelief, she invited me. Not just as a guest, but once again as her maid of honor. I stared at that card for a long time, torn between laughter and disgust. The audacity of this woman. After everything that happened, after the nuclear fallout of our last encounter, she still thought I'd stand beside her? At first, I planned to ignore it, toss it in the trash and never think about it again. But then I saw the date. It was scheduled for the exact same weekend Alex and I had planned our own wedding years ago, the one that never happened. And just like that, the itch returned. I didn't want revenge this time. Not really. I'd already had that. But part of me, the part that still remembered the way she had laughed with Alex behind my back, wanted closure on my own terms. So I sent her a polite message, congratulating her and saying I'd attend. And, oh, I was going to attend. In the months leading up to the wedding, I quietly learned everything I could about Daniel. LinkedIn, Facebook, mutual acquaintances. I became an expert in his life. And the more I learned, the more I realized Mia had done it again. Daniel had no idea who she truly was. He didn't know about the betrayal, the cheating, the manipulation. To him, she was the perfect woman, sweet, loyal, devoted. That was about to change. A week before the ceremony, I reached out to Daniel. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. I simply asked if he'd be willing to meet me for coffee. I'm an old friend of Mia's, I said, and I think there's something you deserve to know before the wedding. He agreed. I remember sitting across from him, watching the color drain from his face as I told him the story. The betrayal, the affair, the broken engagement, the fact that Mia had asked me, the woman whose relationship she destroyed, to stand beside her again. I even showed him a few screenshots and photos. To his credit, he didn't yell or get angry. He just sat there, silent, his jaw tight. When I finished, he thanked me and left. I honestly wasn't sure what he'd do. 2 days before the wedding, I got my answer. Mia called me, hysterical. Daniel had confronted her, demanded answers, and when she tried to spin the story, he broke off the engagement. Just like that. This time, though, I didn't feel the same rush of satisfaction I had before. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt done. It was like I'd finally closed the book on that chapter of my life. Mia had built her world on lies, and I'd simply handed the truth to the people who needed it. The rest wasn't my responsibility. But life, as always, had one final twist. About 6 months after that second disaster, I ran into Mia at a bookstore. It was one of those accidental, cinematic encounters. We both reached for the same book, looked up, and froze. She looked different, smaller somehow, defeated. We ended up grabbing coffee, and for the first time in years, we spoke like human beings instead of enemies. She told me she'd been in therapy, that she was trying to understand why she'd done the things she did. She admitted she'd been jealous of me for years, of my relationship with Alex, of how perfect I seemed. In some twisted way, she'd tried to destroy me because she couldn't stand watching me be happy when she wasn't. And you know what? For the first time, I actually believed her. We didn't become friends again, we never will. But I walked away from that conversation with something I never expected. Genuine closure. I think a part of me had always believed that revenge would heal me, that watching her suffer would erase the pain she caused. But the truth is, healing came not from her misery, but from my ability to move on. Revenge wasn't the destination. It was just the road I needed to walk to get there. Alex reached out one last time, too. He sent a long email, paragraphs of apologies, explanations, regrets. I read it once, and then deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say. I used to think of myself as a victim in this story. The betrayed girlfriend, the backstabbed friend. But I'm not a victim anymore. I'm the author. And I wrote my ending exactly how I wanted it. Sometimes people hear my story and say I was too cruel, that I should have taken the high road. Maybe they're right. But I look at Mia's life, the chaos, the failed engagements, the trail of broken trust, and then I look at mine. I have a career I love, a circle of loyal friends, a partner who treats me like gold. And I think, maybe the high road is overrated. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Some people need to be taught a lesson the hard way. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness. And sometimes, justice doesn't come from karma or fate. Sometimes, it comes from you. If there's anything I hope people take from my story, it's this. Betrayal doesn't define you. It doesn't decide who you are or what your future will be. It's just a wound. And, like all wounds, it can heal. But you get to choose how. You can let it scar you, or you can let it strengthen you. I chose strength. I chose truth. And yes, I chose revenge. Looking back, I don't regret a single step. Because every decision, every carefully planned move, led me here, to a place where I am happy, whole, and free from the people who once tried to break me. And if Mia and Alex ever think of me, and I know they do, I hope they remember that I didn't just survive what they did. I rose above it. I thrived despite them. And that is the sweetest revenge of all. There's one more part of this story, one last chapter that in many ways is my favorite. It didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. There were no confrontations, no explosions, no screaming matches. It was quieter, more subtle, but far more satisfying. About a year after I last saw Mia, life had moved on. I'd met someone real, someone kind. His name was Ethan. He was the kind of man who remembered little details, who held doors open without thinking, who listened more than he spoke. He knew about my past, of course, but he never judged me for it. If anything, he admired my strength, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely loved. One night, as we were making dinner together, he asked me a question I hadn't expected. "If you could go back," he said, "to that day when you found them on the couch, would you do anything differently?" I thought about it for a long time, about the pain, the betrayal, the revenge, about every carefully plotted move, every moment of satisfaction, and every night of doubt. And then I answered honestly. "No," I said, "I wouldn't change a thing." Because the truth is, every step, even the ugly ones, had led me here. If Mia hadn't betrayed me, I might have married Alex. I might have spent my life with someone who would eventually betray me anyway. I might never have found Ethan, never discovered my own resilience, never learned just how strong I could be. I wouldn't wish that kind of betrayal on anyone, but I also wouldn't trade the person it made me for anything. Life has a funny way of balancing itself out. You don't always get justice right away. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes you have to carve it out of the world with your own two hands. But when it comes, when the scales finally tip in your favor, it's worth every moment of pain that led you there. I never heard from Mia again after that conversation in the bookstore. She disappeared from social media, from mutual friends' updates, from everything. Sometimes I wonder where she is, if she's happy, if she's changed. And then I realize it doesn't matter. Her story ended where mine began. As for Alex, the last I heard, he moved to another state and tried dating again, but nothing stuck. Maybe that's karma. Maybe that's just who he is. Either way, he's no longer a part of my story, just a footnote in a chapter I've long since closed. But I do think about that younger version of myself sometimes. The girl who walked into her apartment and saw her world crumble in front of her. The one who spent weeks crying into her pillow, wondering what she did wrong, wondering why she wasn't enough. I wish I could go back and talk to her. I'd tell her that none of it was her fault, that the betrayal said everything about them and nothing about her. I'd tell her that she would survive. More than that, she would thrive. And I'd tell her that one day she'd look back on all of it and smile. Not because it was easy, but because she conquered it. And maybe, if she listened closely, she'd hear the faintest whisper of laughter, the sound of justice served cold. If you're listening to this, and you're in that dark place, if someone you loved has betrayed you, if you feel like your world is falling apart, I want you to know something. It's not the end. It's not even close. One day, you will wake up and realize that the pain doesn't control you anymore. One day, you will look in the mirror and see someone stronger staring back. And one day, you will write the ending to your own story. And it will be so much better than you ever imagined. And when that day comes, you might not even care about revenge anymore. Or maybe you will. And maybe that's okay too. Because revenge isn't always about hurting the other person. Sometimes it's about showing them, and yourself, that they never had the power to destroy you in the first place. That's the real victory. Not the broken engagements or the canceled weddings. Not the tears or the regret. The real victory is the life you build after they're gone. A life so full, so rich, so unapologetically yours that it makes their betrayal seem small and irrelevant. And that's exactly what I did. Now, years later, when I sit on my balcony with Ethan, watching the sun set over a city I love, I think back to that moment, the betrayal that once felt like the end of the world. And I smile, because it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a story where I am the main character, where I am not the victim, but the victor, where betrayal didn't break me, it built me. And if Mia ever thinks about me, if she remembers the girl she betrayed, the girl whose life she tried to steal, I hope she realizes something. I'm doing better without her than I ever could have with her. That's the irony of betrayal. The people who stab you in the back think they're ending you. They think they're writing your final chapter. But they're not. They're just handing you the pen. And once you realize that, you can write anything you want. This is my story. It's not about revenge, not really. It's about survival, about growth, about reclaiming my narrative and turning my pain into power. It's about looking betrayal in the eye and saying, "You don't get to define me." Because in the end, they didn't. I did. And I'll leave you with one final thought, something I've learned through all of this. Betrayal is temporary. Pain is temporary. But dignity, strength, self-worth, those are permanent. And no one, not a cheating boyfriend, not a backstabbing friend, can ever take them from you again. So, to anyone who's been betrayed, hold your head high. They may have broken your heart, but they didn't break you. You're still here. You're still standing. And one day, when they look back and see you thriving without them, that will be the most devastating revenge of all. Because nothing terrifies a betrayer more than the person they tried to destroy living their best life. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Every single day,